The thing about walking into a room full of people who want you dead is that you can feel it on your skin. Not the temperature. Not the air conditioning. The hate. It crawls over you like invisible insects, making every hair on your arm stand up straight. That's exactly what I felt when I pushed open the heavy oak door of Theodore Banks' law office on that Tuesday morning in September. My mother saw me first. Vanessa Parker sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than my entire year's rent, wearing a black Chanel suit that screamed, "Grieving widow's daughter-in-law," even though she'd barely spoken to my grandfather in 5 years. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face was carefully arranged into an expression of sorrow that didn't quite reach her cold blue eyes. When those eyes landed on me, her perfectly painted red lips curved into a smile. That smile made my stomach turn. "Madison," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "How unexpected. I didn't realize you'd been invited." My father, Gregory Parker, sat beside her. He looked older than I remembered. 5 years could do that, I supposed. His dark skin had more lines around the eyes, and his salt and pepper hair had gone mostly silver. He wore an expensive navy suit and a power tie, the same uniform he'd worn every day of my childhood. He didn't smile at me. He just stared, his jaw tight like I was a stain on his perfect leather chair. "Miss Parker was specifically requested to attend," Theodore Banks said from behind his massive mahogany desk. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s with kind brown eyes and a calm voice that somehow made me feel less like I was drowning. "Please, Madison, take a seat." The only empty chair was between my parents and my brother. Bennett Parker sprawled in his chair like he owned the place. At 28, he turned into a carbon copy of our father's expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive attitude. His dark eyes flickered over me with barely concealed disgust. "Still shopping at thrift stores, I see," he muttered. I looked down at my simple black dress. It was from Target, actually, and it was clean and pressed and perfectly appropriate for a wool reading. But to Bennett, anything that didn't have a designer label might as well be garbage. I didn't respond. I just sat down in the empty chair and folded my hands in my lap. The leather was cold beneath my legs. My heart hammered in my chest so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. I hadn't seen these people in 5 years. 5 years since they'd thrown me out of their mansion with one suitcase and told me I was no longer their daughter. 5 years since the last time I'd felt like I belonged to a family. My grandfather's face smiled at me from a silver-framed photo on Theodore's desk. Lawrence Montgomery. The only person in my entire family who'd ever loved me for who I was instead of what I could do for them. And now he was gone. "Shall we begin?" Theodore opened a blue folder on his desk. "We're here for the reading of the last will and testament of Lawrence Montgomery, who passed away on September 3rd. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue even though there were no tears. My father straightened his tie. Bennett leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. "Lawrence Montgomery was very specific about his final wishes," Theodore continued. "He updated his will 6 months ago and had it witnessed and notarized according to all legal requirements. He was of completely sound mind and body when these changes were made." "Of course he was," my mother said quickly. "Lawrence was sharp as a tack right until the end. Such a brilliant man." I bit my tongue. My mother hadn't visited my grandfather once during his final year. I knew because Grandpa Lawrence had told me during one of our secret meetings at the diner on 5th Street, where he'd buy me pancakes and ask about my life and pretend he wasn't one of the richest men in the state. Theodore's eyes moved to me for just a second, and something in his expression told me he knew the truth too. "The estate consists of Montgomery Innovations, a technology company valued at approximately $4 billion, Theodore read. "A real estate portfolio including commercial and residential properties valued at $1.2 billion. Stock portfolios and investments valued at $600 million. Personal property including vehicles, jewelry, art and furnishings valued at approximately $100 million. And liquid assets of $100 million. Total estate value, approximately $6 billion. My mother's breathing quickened. My father leaned forward. Bennett's eyes gleamed. "To my daughter-in-law Vanessa Parker," Theodore read, "I leave the sum of $1. The room went silent. "To my son-in-law Gregory Parker, I leave the sum of $1. My father's face turned dark. A vein throbbed in his temple. "To my grandson Bennett Parker, I leave the sum of $1. Bennett shot out of his chair. "What? That's impossible. There must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," Theodore said calmly. "Please sit down, Mr. Parker. This is absurd." My mother's voice rose and all pretense of grief vanished. "Lawrence wouldn't do this. We're his family. If you'll allow me to finish." Theodore's voice was firm. To my granddaughter, Madison Elizabeth Parker, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate. All properties, all investments, all assets, all personal effects. Everything. The words hit me like a truck. Everything? My vision blurred. My hands started shaking. I couldn't breathe. $6 billion. Grandpa Lawrence had left me $6 billion. This is fraud. My father was on his feet now, his finger jabbing toward Theodore. That girl manipulated him. She poisoned his mind against us. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years, I whispered, but no one heard me. Of course we'll manage it for her. My mother's face transformed back into that terrible smile as she turned to me. You're so young, sweetheart. You don't know anything about running a business empire. Your father and I will take care of everything. We just need you to sign some papers giving us power of attorney. Like hell she will, Theodore said, and I'd never heard a lawyer sound so fierce. Madison is 23 years old and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Lawrence was very clear about that. She's incompetent. Bennett shouted. She's been working as a waitress. She lives in some rat-infested apartment. She can't handle this. There's also a letter, Theodore said quietly, pulling out a sealed envelope. Lawrence wanted this read aloud. My mother went pale. That's not necessary. It's in the will. Theodore broke the seal and began to read. To Madison, my beloved granddaughter. You are reading this because I am gone, and I am sorry I couldn't be there to see you become the amazing woman I always knew you would be. I leave you everything because you are the only person in this family who ever loved me for who I was, not for what I could give you. When your parents threw you out at 18 for refusing to marry a man 3 times your age, I wanted to bring you home. But I knew they would make your life hell, and I couldn't bear to see them break your spirit. So I watched from afar and helped when I could, and I was so proud of every single thing you accomplished on your own. You never asked me for money. You never asked me for anything. You just wanted to have pancakes with your old grandpa and tell me about your day. That's love. That's family. Everything I built for you. Use it well. Use it to help others the way I wish I could have helped you more openly. And to Gregory, Vanessa, and Bennett, you get $1 each because that's all you ever cared about anyway. Money. You threw away something precious when you threw away Madison, and I hope one day you realize what you lost. But I doubt you will. Signed, Lawrence Montgomery. The silence in the room was deafening. Then my mother started to cry, real tears this time, but they were tears of rage, not grief. You little witch, she hissed at me. You manipulated him. You probably forged that letter. The handwriting was authenticated, Theodore said coldly. And there's a video recording as well if you'd like to contest this. My father's hands were shaking. Not with sadness. With fury. This isn't over, Madison. We'll fight this. We'll take you to court. We'll prove he wasn't in his right mind. You won't see a penny of that money. Yeah, Bennett added, stepping toward me with his fists clenched. You think you can just waltz in here and take what's ours? It was never yours, I said quietly, and my voice sounded stronger than I felt. It was his. And he chose what to do with it. My mother stood up, smoothing her skirt, her face twisted with hate. You're going to regret this, Madison. We're your parents. We'll drag you through hell. We'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative little gold digger you are. This meeting is over, Theodore said, standing up. Madison, please stay. The rest of you need to leave. My father leaned close to me as he passed. You're not my daughter, he whispered. You never were. Something inside me cracked at those words, even though I'd known it was true for years. Bennett shoved his chair so hard it crashed to the ground. My mother shot me one last poisonous look before she clicked out of the room on her expensive heels. The door slammed behind them. And I sat there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. I'd just inherited $6 billion. And I'd just declared war on my own family. 5 years ago, I stood in the marble entryway of the Parker mansion with one suitcase in my hand and tears streaming down my face. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, my mother said. She stood at the top of the curved staircase in her silk robe, looking down at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. He's 45 years old, Mom. My voice cracked. I'm 18. He's older than Dad. Richard Blackwell is a successful businessman, my father said from his study doorway. He held a glass of scotch and didn't even look at me. This marriage would be extremely beneficial for our family's business interests. So sell Bennett to him instead. I shouted. My brother appeared at the top of the stairs next to my mother, laughing. Please. I'm actually worth something. You're just a pretty face and not even that special. The words cut deep, but not as deep as what came next. We've given you everything, my mother said, her voice cold and sharp. Private schools, dance lessons, a beautiful home, expensive clothes. We've fed you and housed you for 18 years. And this is how you repay us? By refusing the one thing we've ever asked of you. You're asking me to marry someone I don't love. I couldn't believe we were having this conversation. This was supposed to happen in history books, not in real life. Not in America in 2020. Love. My father laughed, a bitter sound. You're such a child, Madison. Marriage isn't about love. It's about strategy, partnership, building something bigger than yourself. Then you marry him. My father finally looked at me and his eyes were empty. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. If you walk out that door, you're no longer a Parker. We'll cut you off completely. No money. No family. No safety net. Is your childish notion of romance really worth that? I looked up at my mother, silently begging her to intervene. To be a mother for once. She just turned and walked away. Bennett grinned at me. Better start packing, sis. Though I don't know where you'll go. It's not like you have any skills. You can't even balance a checkbook. The next hour was a blur. I threw clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. I grabbed my laptop, my phone charger, a few photos. Everything else, all the expensive things they bought me over the years, I left behind. It all felt tainted now. Bought not out of love, but out of obligation. Or worse, as an investment they expected to pay off. When I came back downstairs, my father was waiting with a security guard. Your car keys, he said, holding out his hand. What? The Mercedes. It's in my name. You're not taking it. I pulled the keys from my pocket with numb fingers and dropped them in his palm. Your credit cards. I handed those over too. Your phone. But I need. It's on our family plan. You're no longer family. I powered it off and gave it to him, fighting back tears. Where will I go? I whispered. That's not my problem anymore. My father nodded to the security guard. Please escort Miss Parker off the property. Don't call me Miss Parker, I said, my voice breaking. If I'm not family, don't use your name for me. My father's expression didn't change. Fine. Please escort this young woman off the property. And Madison? Don't come back. If you show up here again, we'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. The security guard Jerry, who'd worked for us for 10 years and used to sneak me cookies when I was little, looked uncomfortable but took my suitcase. This way, miss, he said quietly. I walked out the front door of the only home I'd ever known. The gates closed behind me with a final, terrible clang. I stood on the sidewalk in the dark, cars rushing past me on the busy street, with nowhere to go and $300 in my pocket from my birthday last month. My phone was gone. My car was gone. My family was gone. I should have felt terrified. Instead, I felt strangely free. I walked 6 blocks to a gas station and used their payphone to call the only person I thought might help me. My best friend from high school, Tasha Williams. No, wait, I remembered I couldn't use that name. My friend Tasha Monroe. She'd graduated the year before and was working at a salon downtown. Hello. Her voice was confused. Nobody called her landline. Tasha, it's Madison. I need help. 30 minutes later, she pulled up in her beat-up Honda. I'd never been so happy to see anyone in my life. Girl, what happened? She asked as I threw my suitcase in her back seat. I told her everything as we drove to her tiny apartment. About Richard Blackwell and his proposal. About my parents' ultimatum. About being thrown out. They can't do that, Tasha said, horrified. You're 18. That's abuse. We should call someone. I'm legally an adult, I said tiredly. They don't owe me anything anymore. And honestly, I don't want anything from them. I'd rather sleep on the street than go back. You're not sleeping on the street. You're staying with me. My couch is lumpy, but it's yours for as long as you need. I cried then, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that I'd been holding back all night. Thank you, I whispered. That's what real family does, Tasha said firmly. And those people? They're not family. Family doesn't treat you like property. I lived on Tasha's couch for 2 months. I got a job waiting tables at a diner. I bought a cheap phone with a prepaid plan. I started taking classes at community college using student loans. And I tried not to think about my family. But then, 3 months after they threw me out, something strange happened. I was walking home from my shift at the diner when I saw him. My grandfather, Lawrence Montgomery, sitting in his expensive car parked outside my apartment building. He rolled down the window when he saw me. Madison, he said, and his voice was full of pain. I'm so sorry. Grandpa. I couldn't believe it. What are you doing here? Can we talk? Please? Just for a few minutes? I got in the car and he drove us to a different diner across town. We sat in a booth in the back and he ordered coffee and pancakes for both of us even though it was 8 at night. Your father told me you chose to leave, he said quietly. That you wanted to be independent and you rejected their help. But I hired a private investigator and I found out the truth. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. His old hands shook as he reached across the table to take mine. You're my granddaughter. I love you. And I'm ashamed of my own daughter-in-law and what she's done to you. Of my son-in-law's cruelty. Of Bennett's betrayal. Why didn't you stop them? The words came out bitter. Because I'm a foolish old man who's been too weak for too long, he said. Your parents control my company's board. If I'd intervened, they would have had me declared mentally incompetent and taken control of everything. I wouldn't have been able to help you at all then. But I want to help you now. Please let me help you. I don't want their money, Grandpa. I can't take anything from that family. It's not their money. It's mine. And I want to give it to you. I can't. I pulled my hand away. If they find out you're helping me, they'll do exactly what you just said. They'll take everything from you. I won't let that happen. He smiled sadly. You've always been too good for this family, Madison. Too kind. Too brave. I'm not brave. I'm terrified all the time. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are. He pulled out his wallet and tried to hand me a stack of cash. I pushed it back. Please don't. I need to do this on my own. I need to prove to myself that I can survive without them. We sat in silence for a while, eating pancakes that tasted like cardboard because we were both too emotional to taste anything. Can I at least see you sometimes? Grandpa Lawrence asked finally. Can we have pancakes together every few weeks? Let me be your grandfather even if I can't be anything else. I thought about saying no. About cutting ties with everyone in that family, even him. But I couldn't. Okay, I whispered. Pancakes. And Madison? One day things will be different. I promise you that. One day I'll make this right. I didn't know what he meant. But 5 years later, sitting in Theodore Bank's office with $6 billion suddenly in my name, I finally understood. My grandfather had been planning this all along. The first year after leaving my family was the hardest. I worked 3 jobs. Breakfast shift at Rosie's Diner from 5 to 11 in the morning, afternoon shift at a bookstore from noon to 5, and evening shift cleaning offices from 6 to midnight. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore the same 5 outfits on rotation until they had holes. But I was free. Tasha let me stay on her couch for 6 months until I saved enough for my own place. When I say place, I mean a studio apartment in the worst part of town that had bars on the windows and roaches in the walls. The toilet leaked. The heat barely worked. Sometimes I heard gunshots at night. It was mine. I cried the first night I slept there, lying on an air mattress I'd bought at a discount store. Not because I was sad. Because I'd done it. I'd survived 6 months on my own, and I had my own space and nobody could take it away from me. Community college was harder than I expected. I'd gone to a fancy private school my whole life where teachers practically wrote papers for you if your parents donated enough money. Now I was in classes with people who actually earned their grades and I was behind. I failed my first math test. I got a C- on my first English essay. I almost gave up. But then I met Professor Janet Moore in my introduction to business class. She was a tiny black woman in her 50s who wore colorful scarves and had a laugh that filled the whole room. She noticed I was struggling. Stay after class, she said one day. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, she offered to tutor me. Why? I asked suspiciously. I can't pay you. Because you show up to every class even though I know you're working 3 jobs. Because you take notes even when you're falling asleep. Because you're trying, and that's more than half these kids do. She crossed her arms. Also because you're smarter than you think you are. Your fundamentals are weak, but your ideas are strong. We just need to build you a better foundation. Professor Moore tutored me twice a week for free. She taught me how to study, how to take tests, how to write a proper essay. More than that, she taught me that I wasn't stupid, I'd just never been taught correctly. By the end of my first year, I made the dean's list. I sent a photo of my grades to Tasha, who'd helped me so much. She texted back, "Told you that you were brilliant." My secret meetings with Grandpa Lawrence continued. Once a month, we'd meet at a different diner in a different part of town. He'd ask about my classes, my jobs, my life. I'd tell him everything except how hard it really was. I didn't want him to worry. But he knew anyway. "You look tired, Madison," he said during one of our meetings. "I'm fine. You're working yourself to death. Please let me help." Grandpa, we've been through this. I know. You're stubborn. You get that from me? He smiled, but it was sad. Your parents ask about you sometimes. My heart jumped. They do. They ask if I've heard from you, if I know where you are. I tell them no. Thank you. They don't ask because they miss you. They ask because they want to make sure you're suffering, that you've learned your lesson and you'll come crawling back. His hands tightened around his coffee mug. I hate that I'm related to such cruel people. You're not like them. I raised your mother. Or failed to raise her properly, which amounts to the same thing. I gave her too much money and not enough love. I was always working, building the company, trying to create an empire to pass down. I didn't realize I was creating monsters. You're a good person, Grandpa. I'm trying to be. Finally. Too late, but trying. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I own a building downtown. Small office spaces. I'm going to be renovating one of the units next month, and I'll need someone to manage the project. The pay is good. The hours are flexible. You could quit those other jobs. I looked at the card. Grandpa, I can't. It's a legitimate job offer. You'd be working. Earning it. No handouts. There are 10 other people I could hire, but you're qualified and you need it. That's not charity. That's opportunity. I wanted to say no. But the truth was, I was exhausted. I'd been running on fumes for months and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. The job changed everything. I quit 2 of my 3 jobs and kept just the weekend shift at the diner because I liked the people there. The office management position paid twice what I'd been making at all 3 jobs combined. I had time to sleep, time to study, time to breathe, and time to start the business idea that had been growing in my mind. I'd always loved making jewelry. When I was a kid, before everything went bad, I used to spend hours in my room creating necklaces and bracelets from beads and wire. After I left home, I couldn't afford supplies, so I'd stopped. But now, with a little extra money, I started again. I bought basic supplies from craft stores. I watched YouTube tutorials on my laptop. I experimented with different designs. And slowly, piece by piece, I created a small collection. I opened an online store on a handmade goods website. I called it Madison Made because I wasn't creative with names and I was too tired to think of anything better. I didn't expect anything to happen. But then someone bought a necklace. Then someone else bought earrings. Then someone commissioned a custom piece. Within 6 months, I was making almost as much from my jewelry business as I was from my regular job. What I didn't know was that my grandfather had been secretly buying pieces under different names. He'd been sending the links to his wealthy friends, telling them about this talented young artist. He'd been building my customer base without me knowing. I found out years later after he died when Theodore showed me the receipts. Grandpa Lawrence had bought 47 pieces of jewelry over 3 years. He'd never worn any of them, they were women's jewelry, but he'd kept every single one in a special box in his closet. The note with them said, I couldn't help you openly, but I could do this. I'm so proud of you. Love, Grandpa. By the time I turned 21, I'd graduated from community college with honors and transferred to a 4-year university. I was taking business classes and art classes, learning how to turn my hobby into a real company. My jewelry business was bringing in steady income. I'd moved to a better apartment, still small, but no roaches and the toilet worked. I was doing it. I was actually doing it. And through it all, Grandpa Lawrence was there. Not fixing my problems. Not handing me money. Just having pancakes with me once a month and telling me he was proud of me. You're going to do something amazing with your life, he said during one of our last meetings about 8 months before he died. Not because of money or connections or family name. Because of who you are. You're special, Madison. Don't ever forget that. You're special too, Grandpa. I'm an old man with regrets. But you're just getting started. And I can't wait to see what you build. You looked tired that day. More tired than usual. I asked if he was okay and he waved me off with a smile. Just old, sweetheart. Just old. 3 weeks later, he collapsed at his office. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack. He survived, but he was weak. He needed round-the-clock care. I tried to visit him in the hospital, but my parents had him moved to a private facility and put my name on a banned visitors list. I never saw him again. The last text I got from him, sent from a nurse's phone, said, I love you. Be strong. You're going to be okay. Better than okay. I made sure of it. I didn't understand what he meant. Not until 3 months later, when he died and Theodore Banks called me to come to the will reading. Not until I learned that every single thing my grandfather had built, every penny he'd earned, every piece of property he'd owned, was now mine. He'd been planning it all along. And he'd been preparing me to handle it by making me build something for myself first. I found out my grandfather died from a news notification on my phone. I was restocking jewelry supplies in my apartment when my phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Tech billionaire Lawrence Montgomery passes away at age 76. I dropped the box of beads I was holding. They scattered across the floor like tears, tiny glass pieces bouncing and rolling everywhere, but I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at my phone screen, reading the same sentence over and over. Lawrence Montgomery passes away. My grandfather was dead. The article didn't say much. Just that he'd passed peacefully in his sleep at a private care facility. That he was survived by family members who declined to comment. That he'd built Montgomery Innovations from nothing and turned it into a $4 billion empire. It didn't say that he used to take his granddaughter out for pancakes. It didn't say that he'd secretly helped her survive when her family threw her away. It didn't say that he was kind and funny and the only person who'd ever loved me unconditionally. I called the care facility, but they wouldn't give me any information. I called Theodore Banks, the family lawyer whose name I remembered from years ago, but his office said he was handling funeral arrangements and wasn't taking calls. I called my old phone number, my parents' house, even though I'd promised myself I never would. Bennett answered. Hello. My voice came out broken. It's Madison. I just heard about Grandpa. When's the funeral? Where? He laughed. Actually laughed. You've got some nerve calling here. He's my grandfather. I have a right to say goodbye. You lost all your rights when you walked out 5 years ago. The funeral is family only and you're not family. Don't bother showing up. Security has your photo. They'll remove you. The line went dead. I stood there with my phone in my shaking hand, rage and grief fighting for control inside my chest. They weren't going to tell me when the funeral was. They were going to bury my grandfather, and they weren't even going to let me know where or when. I spent 2 hours calling every funeral home in the city before I found the right one. The receptionist wasn't supposed to give out information about private services, but when I started crying on the phone and explained that I was his granddaughter who'd been cut off from the family, she took pity on me. Oak Hill Cemetery, she whispered. Thursday at 2. I'm sorry for your loss, honey. Thursday. That gave me 2 days. 2 days to prepare to face the family that hated me. 2 days to figure out how to say goodbye to the only person who'd ever really been on my side. I didn't sleep Wednesday night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering every pancake breakfast, every conversation, every piece of advice Grandpa Lawrence had ever given me. Be brave, he'd said once. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are. So I would be brave. Even if it killed me. Thursday afternoon, I put on my only black dress, the same one I'd wear to the will reading a week later, though I didn't know that yet. I pulled my hair back. I didn't own any fancy jewelry except the pieces I'd made myself, so I wore a simple necklace I'd created using my grandfather's favorite color, deep blue. I took 3 buses to Oak Hill Cemetery because I didn't have a car. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The funeral was already in progress when I arrived. I could see the crowd gathered under a large white tent near the top of a hill. Expensive cars lined the narrow cemetery road. Men in black suits held umbrellas over well-dressed people I didn't recognize. I stood at the bottom of the hill in the rain, no umbrella, just watching. I could see my mother near the front, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My father stood beside her with his arm around her shoulders, looking appropriately somber. Bennett stood on her other side, checking his phone. They looked like a perfect grieving family. I wanted to scream. I started walking up the hill. A security guard in a yellow rain jacket stopped me halfway. Excuse me, miss. This is a private service. I'll need to see your invitation. I'm his granddaughter. Name? Madison Parker. He looked at a paper on his clipboard, then looked at me with something like pity in his eyes. I'm sorry, miss. You're not on the list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Please. My voice broke. I just want to say goodbye. I won't cause any trouble. I'll stand in the back. Nobody will even know I'm here. I have my orders. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have to escort you out. Tears mixed with rain on my face. He was my grandfather. I loved him. I'm sorry. He reached for my arm, and that's when I heard a voice I didn't recognize. Wait. A man in his 60s with kind eyes walked down the hill toward us. He wore an expensive suit and carried a large black umbrella. I'm Theodore Banks, the family attorney. Let her through. Sir, she's on the banned list. I'm aware. Let her through anyway, or you'll be looking for new employment. The security guard stepped aside, looking uncomfortable. Theodore held his umbrella over both of us. You must be Madison. How did you know? Your grandfather described you perfectly. Said you were the most beautiful soul he'd ever known and that I'd recognize you by the kindness in your eyes. He smiled gently. He also said you were stubborn and you'd probably show up even if they tried to keep you away. I'm sorry. I don't want to cause problems. You have every right to be here. More right than most of these people. Theodore gestured toward the tent. Come, stand with me in the back. If anyone objects, they'll have to go through me first. We walked up the hill together. I saw the exact moment my mother noticed me. Her face went from fake grief to real rage in an instant. She grabbed my father's arm and pointed at me. My father's jaw clenched, but Theodore gave him a look that could freeze fire. Nobody said anything. I stood in the back of the tent, rain dripping off the edges onto my shoes, and listened to a minister who'd probably never met my grandfather talk about what a great man he was. Then my father gave a eulogy about what a brilliant businessman Lawrence Montgomery had been and how he'd built an empire that would live on through his family. I wanted to throw up. Bennett spoke next, some rehearsed speech about how Grandpa had taught him the value of hard work and dedication. My grandfather had barely spoken to Bennett in the last 5 years. My mother didn't speak. She just cried loudly into her handkerchief, making sure everyone could see how devastated she was. It was all performance. All fake. Nobody talked about the real Lawrence Montgomery. The man who loved pancakes and bad jokes. The man who bought 47 pieces of jewelry from his granddaughter's online store just to help her succeed. The man who met me in secret diners because he knew his own family would punish me if they found out he was helping me. When the service ended, people started filing past the casket to pay their respects. I waited until almost everyone had gone. Then I walked up alone. The casket was beautiful dark wood with brass handles and a spray of white roses on top. But I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to see him one more time. Except the casket was closed. I pressed my hand against the smooth wood and closed my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. For believing in me when nobody else did. For teaching me that I was worth something. For being my family when I didn't have one. I love you, Grandpa. I'll make you proud. I promise. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, sharp and cold. Get her out of here. I opened my eyes and saw security guards approaching. Theodore stepped between us. Touch her and I'll sue you personally for assault. This is our family event, my father said. She has no right to be here. She has every right. Theodore's voice could have cut glass. And if you continue to harass her, I'll make sure everyone here knows exactly why Lawrence Montgomery removed you from his will and left everything to Madison. The crowd went silent. My mother's face turned white. What? The will reading is scheduled for Tuesday, Theodore said calmly. Madison has been formally invited. The rest of you will learn your fate then. Until that time, I suggest you leave her alone. I could see my father's mind working, trying to figure out what Theodore meant. Trying to calculate how much of the estate he was getting. He had no idea. None of them did. Theodore offered me his arm. Come, Madison. Let me drive you home. I took one last look at my grandfather's casket, then walked down the hill with Theodore while my family stared at us in confused silence. The rain was starting to clear. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun was breaking through. I spent the days between the funeral and the will reading in a state of numb confusion. Theodore Banks had told me to come to his office on Tuesday at 10 in the morning. He wouldn't tell me anything else over the phone, just that it was important and I should be there. I assumed my grandfather had left me something small. Maybe some jewelry. Maybe a little bit of money to help with school. I never imagined, not in my wildest dreams, that he'd leave me everything. Tuesday morning, I put on my black dress again. It was the nicest thing I owned. I took 2 buses to downtown and walked 3 blocks to Theodore's office building, a tall glass structure that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. The elevator had mirrors on every wall. I looked at myself, tired eyes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a dress from Target and shoes from a discount store, and wondered what I was doing there. The receptionist on the 15th floor smiled at me. You must be Miss Parker. Mr. Banks is expecting you. Conference room B, down the hall on your right. My hands were shaking as I walked down the hallway. And that's when I saw them through the glass walls of the conference room. My mother. My father. Bennett. All sitting there in their expensive clothes, looking like they owned the world. That was when I'd walked in and everything changed. Now, sitting in Theodore's office after my family had stormed out, I tried to make my brain work. $6 billion. The number didn't make sense. It was too big. Too impossible. I don't understand, I whispered. Theodore sat down across from me. Your grandfather spent the last year of his life planning this very carefully. He knew your parents would contest the will, so he documented everything. Medical evaluations proving his sound mind. Statements from his doctors. Video recordings. He left nothing to chance. Why? Why give me everything? Because he loved you. And because he saw what I saw the day you showed up at his funeral in the rain, uninvited and grieving, while your family performed for the cameras. He knew who you really were. Theodore opened another folder. There's a lot we need to discuss. The estate is complex. But first, I need to show you something. He pulled out a tablet and pressed play on a video. My grandfather's face appeared on the screen. I stopped breathing. He looked older than I remembered, sitting in what looked like his home office. His white hair was thin and his face was tired, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Hello, Madison," he said, and his voice cracked my heart open. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I wanted more time with you, but we don't always get what we want." Tears poured down my face. "I'm sure Theodore has already read you the will, and I'm sure your parents are furious." "Good. They deserve to be furious after what they did to you. What they've been doing to you for 5 years while I watched and felt helpless." He leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. "I'm leaving you everything, Madison, because you're the only person in my family who deserves it. Not because you asked for it. Not because you manipulated me. But because you're good. You're kind. You're brave. You built something from nothing without any help from anyone, and you did it with grace and dignity and strength that I admire more than you'll ever know." His eyes got wet. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you more openly. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home. I'm sorry I let your parents throw you away like garbage. Those are my biggest regrets. But I'm not sorry for this. I'm not sorry for giving you the tools to build something amazing. To help people who need it the way you needed it. To create a legacy that's about more than money." He smiled, that familiar gentle smile I'd missed so much. "They're going to fight you. Your parents, Bennett, probably other people too. They're going to say you manipulated me. That I was senile. That you don't deserve this. Don't listen to them. You deserve every penny. You've earned it by being a good person in a family full of bad ones." His expression grew serious. "Theodore has instructions about everything. Documents you'll need. Evidence to protect you. Use it. Fight for what's yours. Don't let them bully you into giving up. And Madison? Live your life. Really live it. Don't let this money change who you are. Stay kind. Stay brave. Stay you." He pressed his hand to his chest, right over his heart. "I love you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. I'm so sorry I have to leave you to face this alone. But you're strong enough. I know you are. You've always been strong enough." The video ended. I sat there sobbing, unable to speak. Theodore handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently while I cried. "He recorded that 6 months before he died," Theodore said quietly. "He knew he didn't have much time left. His heart was failing. He wanted to make sure you knew why he was doing this." "I don't know if I can handle this," I whispered. "I don't know anything about running a company. I barely graduated from community college. They're right, I'm just a waitress who makes jewelry. You're so much more than that. And you don't have to do everything alone. Montgomery Innovations has an excellent leadership team. Your role, at least initially, will be as majority shareholder and board chair. You'll learn. Your grandfather had faith in you, and so do I. What about my parents? What will they do?" Theodore's expression darkened. "They've already called me 3 times since they left. They're threatening to file a lawsuit. They'll claim your grandfather was incompetent. They'll try to drag this through court for years if they can." My stomach dropped. "Will they win?" "No. Your grandfather's documentation is airtight. I've been practicing law for 35 years, and I've never seen a will this thoroughly prepared. But the process will be ugly. They'll say terrible things about you in court and in the media. They'll try to destroy your reputation. You need to be prepared for that." I thought about my mother's final words as she left. "We'll make sure everyone knows what a manipulative little gold digger you are." Can they freeze the assets? Keep me from accessing anything? They can try. They'll probably file for a temporary injunction while the case is pending. That means you might not be able to touch any of the money or make any decisions about the company for several months. But you'll still have your job, your jewelry business, your life. You've survived worse. He was right. I had survived worse. I'd survived being thrown out at 18 with nothing. I'd survived 3 jobs and no sleep. I'd survived roaches and gunshots and ramen for dinner every night. I could survive this. What do I need to do? I asked. Theodore smiled. First, get a lawyer. I can recommend several excellent attorneys who specialize in estate litigation. Second, keep living your life as normally as possible. Don't talk to the press. Don't respond to your family's accusations. Let your lawyers handle it. Third, trust the process. This will take time, but you will win. What if I don't want to fight? What if I just give them some of the money to make them go away? Don't. Theodore's voice was sharp. Your grandfather specifically forbade any settlements. He included a clause in the will that says if you give them even 1 penny beyond what he left them, the entire estate goes to charity instead. He wanted to make sure they couldn't bully you into surrendering. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa Lawrence was protecting me. Okay, I said, straightening my shoulders. Tell me what to do. Tell me everything I need to know. We spent the next 3 hours going through documents. Theodore explained the structure of the estate, the company, the properties. He showed me financial statements that made my head spin. He gave me contact information for accountants, lawyers, advisors. It was overwhelming. But I'd learned something important in the 5 years since my family threw me away. I was stronger than I thought. Smarter than I thought. More capable than anyone had ever given me credit for. And I had something my family didn't have. I had integrity. I had honor. I had the determination to honor my grandfather's final wishes, no matter what it cost me. When I finally left Theodore's office that afternoon, the sun was setting over the city. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the tall buildings around me, at the expensive cars passing by, at the world I'd just inherited whether I was ready for it or not. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. You're going to regret this. Dad. I deleted it without responding. Then I walked to the bus stop, rode 2 buses back to my apartment in the bad part of town, and made myself a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. Because no matter how much money I'd just inherited, I was still me. And I was going to make sure I stayed that way. The lawsuit came 3 days after the will reading. I was at work at the diner because I hadn't quit my job even though I technically owned $6 billion when Theodore called. They filed, he said without preamble. Gregory and Vanessa Parker are contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence. They're asking for the entire estate to be divided equally among all family members. My hand shook as I held the phone. What does that mean? It means we're going to court. I've arranged for you to meet with Patricia Chindam. I can't use that name. I've arranged for you to meet with Patricia Adams. She's one of the best estate litigation attorneys in the state. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? I'm scheduled to work. Madison. His voice was gentle but firm. This is more important. I looked around the diner. Rosie, the owner, was at the register. She'd given me a job when nobody else would. She'd let me take food home when she knew I couldn't afford groceries. She'd been kind when I'd had nobody else. I'll be there, I said. The next morning, I met Patricia Adams in Theodore's conference room. She was a tall woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. I've reviewed the case, she said, spreading documents across the table. Your parents have hired Jameson and Associates. They're expensive and aggressive, which means your parents are serious about this. They're not just making threats. They're going for blood. Can they win? I asked. Not if we do our job right. Your grandfather's documentation is excellent. But they're going to make this ugly. They've already started leaking stories to the press. She pulled out her phone and showed me a news headline. Estranged granddaughter inherits billions while grieving family cut off. The article painted me as a manipulative outsider who'd swooped in to steal my poor grandfather's fortune. It quoted unnamed family sources, saying I'd been cut off for drug problems and irresponsible behavior. That I'd only reconciled with my grandfather in his final months when he was weak and vulnerable. Every word was a lie. They're trying to destroy your reputation before we even get to court, Patricia said. They want public opinion on their side. We need to counter that, but carefully. Anything you say can be used against you. What should I do? Nothing. Say nothing. Don't talk to reporters. Don't post on social media. Live your life quietly and let us handle the PR through official channels. She looked at me seriously. Can you do that? Can you stay silent while they drag your name through the mud? I thought about the last 5 years. About being invisible. About keeping my head down and surviving. Yes, I said. I can do that. Good. Now they've also filed for a temporary restraining order to freeze all estate assets until the case is resolved. We have a hearing next week. In the meantime, you can't touch any of the money or make any decisions regarding Montgomery Innovations. My stomach sank. How long will the case take? 6 months minimum. Possibly over a year if they appeal. A year of living in my studio apartment while my family tried to take everything away from me. A year of watching my name get destroyed in the media. A year of fighting. I can do that too, I said. Patricia smiled. Your grandfather said you were tough. I'm starting to see why. The temporary restraining order was granted the following week. I sat in a courtroom while my parents' lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Gerald Jameson, argued that I might liquidate assets or hide money before the trial. That I was a flight risk. That the estate needed protection. Patricia countered that I'd lived in the same apartment for 3 years and worked at the same diner for 4. That I'd made no attempts to access any of the estate funds. That the only protection needed was from the very people contesting the will. The judge granted the restraining order anyway. It's temporary, Patricia assured me afterward. And it works in our favor actually. They can't claim you're stealing or mismanaging funds when you're legally barred from touching them. That night, I came home to find Bennett waiting outside my apartment building. Nice place, he said, looking at the graffiti on the wall. Real classy. What do you want? To talk. To explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice at that while reading. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Look, Madison, this got out of hand. Mom and Dad are furious and they're making me testify against you. They're saying I have to say you manipulated Grandpa or they'll cut me off. So I don't want to do it. I don't want to lie in court. Then don't. You don't understand. Mom and Dad control everything. My job, my apartment, my car, it's all through their company. If I don't do what they say, I'll end up like you. Living in a place like this, working at a diner. Is that supposed to insult me? I cut him off. Because I'm not ashamed of where I live or where I work. I earned everything I have. Can you say the same? Bennett's face flushed. I didn't come here to fight. Then why did you come? To ask you to share. To give Mom and Dad something so they'll back off. You have $6 billion, Madison. You could give them each $100 million and still be rich. Why not just do it? Why make this a war? I looked at my brother, the stranger who'd laughed when they threw me out, who'd ignored me for 5 years, who was now asking me to surrender because it was convenient for him. Grandpa Lawrence didn't want them to have his money, I said quietly. He left them each $1 for a reason. And he put a clause in the will that says if I give them anything more, the entire estate goes to charity. So even if I wanted to give them something which I don't, I couldn't. That's insane. That's Grandpa protecting me from exactly this conversation. From people like you trying to manipulate me into giving up what's mine. Bennett ran his hand through his hair. They're going to win, you know. Dad's hired the best lawyers. They have evidence that Grandpa was sick, that he was on medication that affected his judgment. He had a heart condition. That didn't make him incompetent. They have testimony from his doctors. No, they don't. I've seen all the medical records. Every doctor said he was completely sound mentally. Bennett's eyes shifted away. They'll find something. They always do. And when you lose, you'll have nothing. You'll be back here in this apartment, working at that diner, except everyone will know you're the girl who tried to steal from her own family. Is that really what you want? I'd rather have nothing in my integrity than billions and be like you. He flinched like I'd hit him. I'm trying to help you, he said. No, you're not. You're trying to help yourself. Now get out of here before I call the police. Madison. Go. He left. I went inside and locked the door, my hands shaking. That night, I got 7 phone calls from blocked numbers. I didn't answer any of them. Then the calls stopped and text messages started coming through. You're making a mistake. We're your family. We know what's best for you. Give us what we deserve or we'll destroy you. Everyone will know what you really are. I blocked every number. But they kept finding new ways to contact me. The next week, a reporter showed up at the diner. Madison Parker, she said, camera crew behind her. Can you comment on the allegations that you manipulated your grandfather into cutting off his family? Rosie stepped between us. Get out of my diner. The public has a right to know. I said get out or I'm calling the cops. Rosie pointed to the door. She's working. She's not answering questions. The reporter left, but she filmed me through the window for another 10 minutes before finally driving away. You okay, honey? Rosie asked. I'm fine. You want to talk about what's going on? I keep seeing your name in the news. I can't. I'm sorry. My lawyer said not to discuss it with anyone. Rosie patted my hand. You're a good girl, Madison. I don't believe a word of what they're saying about you. You keep your head up, you hear me? I almost cried. Because in a world where my own family was trying to destroy me, Rosie, who barely knew me, believed in me anyway. The attacks continued for weeks. More articles appeared, each one worse than the last. Photos of me looking tired after work with headlines like, "Alleged fortune hunter shows no remorse." Stories about how I'd been estranged from my family for years due to behavioral problems. Anonymous quotes from family friends, saying I'd always been manipulative and greedy. None of it was true, but nobody cared about the truth. My online jewelry business started getting one-star reviews from fake accounts. "Don't buy from this scammer. She stole from her dying grandfather." Manipulative and dishonest. I had to shut down the store. Someone found my address and published it online. I started getting hate mail. Patricia told me to document everything, which I did. But it felt like I was drowning in poison and nobody was throwing me a rope. Then, 3 months into the legal battle, something changed. Theodore called me late one night. "We got it." "Got what?" "The evidence your grandfather left us. The safety deposit box." "Madison, this changes everything." The safety deposit box was in a bank vault downtown, registered under both Lawrence Montgomery's name and mine. "He added you 6 months before he died," Theodore explained as we waited for the bank manager. "Nobody else knew about it. Not your parents, not Bennett. Just you, me, and the bank." The manager led us into a private room with a long table. She brought in a metal box about the size of a briefcase and set it down carefully. "Take your time," she said, then left us alone. Theodore opened the box. Inside were folders. Dozens of them, all labeled and organized. "Your grandfather was meticulous," Theodore said, pulling them out one by one. "He knew exactly what your parents would do, and he prepared for all of it." The first folder was labeled Medical Records. Theodore opened it to reveal comprehensive evaluations from 3 different doctors, all dated within the last year of my grandfather's life. Each one stated clearly that Lawrence Montgomery was of sound mind, had full mental capacity, understood his decisions, and showed no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. "These directly contradict what your parents' lawyers are claiming," Theodore said. The second folder was labeled Financial Records. It contained detailed accounting of every penny my grandfather had given me over the 5 years since they threw me out. Money orders sent to my P.O. box. Receipts from the dinners we'd shared. Purchase records from my jewelry business showing he'd bought under different names. Total amount, $47,000 over 5 years. "This proves he was helping you," Theodore said. "But more importantly, it proves the amounts were reasonable and spread out over time. Not large suspicious transfers that would indicate manipulation." The third folder was labeled Surveillance Records. My stomach turned. Surveillance? "Your grandfather hired a private investigator 3 years ago. He wanted documentation of what your parents were really like. What they were planning. What they said about him when they thought nobody was listening." Theodore pulled out transcripts of recorded conversations. My parents discussing how to get power of attorney over Lawrence Montgomery. Strategies for having him declared incompetent. Plans for what they'd do with his company once they had control. There were photos too. My mother laughing at a party 2 days after my grandfather's funeral. My father meeting with lawyers weeks before Lawrence died, clearly planning the legal challenge already. "They were planning to contest the will before he even died," I whispered. "Yes. And your grandfather knew it. That's why he documented everything." The fourth folder was labeled Bennett Parker. Inside were emails between Bennett and my parents. In them, Bennett expressed doubts about their plan to contest the will. He said it felt wrong. That maybe Madison deserved the inheritance. My parents' responses were cruel. They called him weak. Said he was betraying the family. Threatened to cut him off if he didn't cooperate. The final email, dated 2 weeks before the will reading, was from my mother. "You will testify against Madison in court, or you will end up exactly like her with nothing. Stop being emotional and think about your future." "Bennett tried to stand up for you," Theodore said quietly. "They forced him into this." I thought about Bennett showing up at my apartment asking me to share. Maybe he'd been trying to find a way out for both of us. The fifth folder was labeled Madison. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photos. Hundreds of them. Photos of me walking to work. Photos of me at community college. Photos of me in the diner, smiling at customers. Photos of my jewelry displayed in my online store. Photos of me laughing with Tasha. My grandfather had been watching me for 5 years. Not in a creepy way. In a protective way. There were notes too in his handwriting. Madison received an A on her business final. So proud. Madison's jewelry business hit $10,000 in sales this month. She did this all on her own. Saw Madison at the diner today. She looked tired but happy. She's surviving. I started crying. He documented your life, Theodore said. Your achievements. Your struggles. Your character. He wanted proof that you were exactly who he said you were, a strong, independent young woman who built something from nothing. Someone who deserved his trust. The last item in the box wasn't in a folder. It was a USB drive with a label that said, "For the trial." Theodore plugged it into his laptop. A video file appeared. The same one I'd watched in his office, of my grandfather explaining why he'd left me everything. But there was another file too. A longer one dated 1 week before he died. Theodore clicked play. My grandfather appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a hospital room. He was in a bed wearing a hospital gown hooked up to monitors. But his eyes were clear and sharp. A doctor stood next to him. "Mr. Montgomery," the doctor said, "can you state your full name for the record?" "Lawrence Edward Montgomery." "And do you understand why we're recording this?" "Yes." "Because my family is going to try to claim I was out of my mind when I made my will, and I want proof that I wasn't." He looked directly at the camera. "I am of completely sound mind. I understand exactly what I'm doing. I am leaving my entire estate to my granddaughter, Madison Elizabeth Parker, because she is the only person in my family who deserves it." The doctor asked him a series of questions. Math problems. Memory tests. Current events. Basic cognitive assessments. My grandfather answered every single one perfectly. "What year is it?" 2024. "Who is the current president?" "Joe Biden." "Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" 100, 93, 86, 79. He counted flawlessly. Then the doctor asked harder questions. About his business. About his assets. About the specific details of his will. My grandfather answered everything with precision and clarity. "Why are you leaving your estate to Madison instead of your other family members?" the doctor asked. Lawrence Montgomery's expression hardened. "Because Madison is the only one who ever loved me for who I was. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, married into this family for money and social status. My son-in-law, Gregory, only tolerated me because of what I could do for his career. My grandson, Bennett, was raised to see me as a bank account instead of a person. But Madison?" His face softened. "Madison just wanted to have pancakes with her grandpa. She never asked me for a thing. When her parents threw her out, she built a life for herself instead of crawling back and begging. She's strong. She's kind. She's everything they're not." "And you're certain this is what you want?" "Completely certain. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He looked at the camera again. "Madison, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone and they're fighting you. Don't let them win. You deserve this. Use the money to build something good. Help people. Be the person I always knew you were. I love you, sweetheart." The video ended. I sat there sobbing. This video, combined with all the other documentation, makes your parents' case impossible to win, Theodore said. "We'll present this in court, and the judge will have no choice but to rule in your favor." "When?" I asked. "When can we show this?" "The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. We'll file all of this as evidence beforehand, but we'll save the video for the courtroom. Maximum impact." "What about my parents? If they know we have this?" "They'll try to settle. They'll offer you deals. They might even apologize and try to manipulate you into dropping the case. Don't engage. Don't respond. Let your lawyers handle everything." That night, I lay in bed thinking about my grandfather sitting in that hospital bed, dying but still fighting for me. Still protecting me. Still making sure I'd be okay after he was gone. He'd thought of everything. And I wasn't going to let him down. The trial began on a cold morning in December, almost 6 months after my grandfather's death. I wore a simple navy suit that Patricia had helped me pick out. Nothing too expensive, nothing too cheap. Professional but not pretentious. "Remember," Patricia told me as we walked into the courthouse, "don't react to anything they say. Stay calm. Stay composed. Let me handle the lawyers. When it's your turn to testify, just tell the truth." The courtroom was packed. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their legal team. My mother wore all black like she was still in mourning. My father wore his power suit. Bennett sat behind them, looking uncomfortable. On our side, it was just Patricia, Theodore, me, and one associate. We didn't need a huge team. We had the truth. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Harrison, called the court to order. Gerald Jameson, my parents' lawyer, gave his opening statement first. "Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable elderly man who was manipulated by a cunning young woman who saw an opportunity for wealth. Lawrence Montgomery was sick. He was on multiple medications. He was isolated from his family in his final months, giving Madison Parker the perfect opportunity to influence him. She preyed on his loneliness and convinced him to disinherit his loving family who had cared for him his entire life. It took everything I had not to react. Patricia's opening statement was brief and direct. Your Honor, this case is actually about a family that threw away their daughter and granddaughter when she refused to marry a man 3 times her age. It's about a young woman who built a life from nothing while her family ignored her. And it's about a grandfather who loved his granddaughter enough to ensure she was taken care of after he was gone. The evidence will show that Lawrence Montgomery was of completely sound mind, that he made his decision freely and clearly, and that the only manipulation here is coming from the very people contesting his wishes. The first day of testimony was brutal. Gerald Jameson called my grandfather's doctor to the stand, not one of the doctors who'd evaluated him for the will, but his general practitioner who'd treated him for years. Dr. Peterson, can you describe Mr. Montgomery's health in his final months? He had a serious heart condition. He was on multiple medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, pain management. Pain management? You mean painkillers? Yes, but at therapeutic doses. Could these medications have affected his cognitive function? It's possible, but... Thank you, doctor. Patricia stood up for cross-examination. Dr. Peterson, did you ever observe any signs of cognitive decline in Mr. Montgomery? No. Did you ever have concerns about his mental capacity? No. Did he ever seem confused or disoriented in his appointments? No. He was always sharp. Always knew exactly what was going on. Thank you, doctor. Next, Jameson called character witnesses, people who claimed my grandfather had become isolated and paranoid in his final months. That he'd stopped attending family events. That he'd been withdrawing from people. Patricia dismantled each one on cross-examination. When was the last time you actually spoke to Mr. Montgomery? About 3 years ago. 3 years? So you don't actually know what his state of mind was in his final months, do you? Well, no, but... Thank you. Then Jameson called Bennett to the stand. My brother looked miserable as he was sworn in. Mr. Parker, can you describe your relationship with your grandfather? We were close, Bennett said, and his voice cracked. He was like a father to me. And were you surprised when you learned he'd left everything to your sister? Yes. Very surprised. Why do you think he did that? Bennett's eyes flicked to me, then away. I think Madison manipulated him. She started meeting with him secretly. She must have convinced him to change the will. My hands clenched under the table. Thank you. No further questions. Patricia stood up for cross-examination, and her voice was ice. Mr. Parker, you testified that you and your grandfather were close. How often did you visit him in his final year? Bennett shifted uncomfortably. I don't remember exactly. Let me help your memory. According to visitor logs from the care facility where your grandfather spent his final 3 months, you visited him exactly twice. Your parents visited 3 times. Madison visited 0 times because she was banned from the facility. Does that sound like a close family? We were busy. Too busy to visit your dying grandfather, but not too busy to contest his will? Objection. Jameson stood up. Sustained, Judge Harrison said. Rephrase, counselor. Patricia's expression didn't change. Mr. Parker, why did you visit your grandfather so rarely? I don't know. Work was. Or was it because, as these emails show, your parents told you not to visit him? That they were already planning to contest the will and didn't want documentation of their neglect? Patricia held up printed emails. Bennett's face went white. I don't. These are emails from your mother, dated 6 months before Mr. Montgomery's death, instructing you and your father to minimize contact with him. Quote, we need to establish that he was isolated so we can claim Madison influenced him. Don't visit too often. Did you receive these emails, Mr. Parker? Yes, Bennett whispered. So your mother told you to neglect your grandfather specifically to build a legal case against your sister? Yes. The courtroom erupted in whispers. No further questions, Patricia said. My parents' faces were bright red. The trial continued for 3 more days. More witnesses. More evidence. More lies from my parents' side that Patricia systematically destroyed. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I was terrified. Patricia had prepared me, but actually sitting in that witness box with everyone staring at me was overwhelming. Jameson tried to break me. Miss Parker, isn't it true that you were estranged from your family for 5 years? Yes. And isn't it true that during those 5 years, you worked multiple low-wage jobs and lived in poverty? Yes. And then, suddenly, your wealthy grandfather dies and leaves you $6 billion. Quite convenient, isn't it? It wasn't convenient. It was tragic. I loved my grandfather and I wish he was still alive. But you can't deny that you benefited from his death. I would trade every penny to have him back. How touching. Tell me, Miss Parker, how often did you meet with your grandfather in his final months? I couldn't meet with him. My family banned me from visiting. How convenient that there are no witnesses to verify that. Actually, Patricia interrupted, standing up, we have documentation of the banned visitor list from the care facility. Madison's name is on it. Would you like to see it? Jameson's jaw tightened. Miss Parker, you claim you loved your grandfather, yet you accepted $6 billion from him. Don't you think that's excessive? I didn't ask for it. He chose to leave it to me. Why do you think he did that? Because he loved me. Because he knew I'd honor his wishes and use the money to help people instead of just enriching myself. And what makes you think you're better than your family? I looked directly at my parents for the first time since the trial started. Because I never threw anyone away for refusing to do what I wanted. Because I never cut off my family for having different dreams than me. Because I built something on my own instead of living off someone else's accomplishments. That's what makes me different. My mother's face twisted with rage. After 3 hours of testimony, Patricia stood up for redirect. Madison, why did your parents throw you out when you were 18? Because I refused to marry a 45-year-old man they wanted me to marry for business reasons. And in the 5 years since then, how often have they tried to contact you? Never. Until my grandfather died. Did you ever ask your grandfather for money or help? No. Did you even know he was wealthy when you first started meeting with him after you left home? I knew he had money, but I didn't know the extent of it. I never asked about it. I just wanted to see my grandpa. Thank you, Madison. I stepped down from the witness box, my legs shaking. The final piece of evidence was the video. Patricia played both videos for the court, the one explaining why my grandfather left me everything, and the medical evaluation proving his sound mind. The courtroom was silent. When the video ended, Judge Harrison looked at my parents with barely concealed disgust. I'll hear closing arguments now, she said. Jameson tried his best, but his closing argument was weak. Everything he'd claimed had been disproven. Every witness he'd called had been dismantled. Patricia's closing argument was simple. Your Honor, Lawrence Montgomery was a brilliant man who made a clear, informed, and legally sound decision about his own estate. His family doesn't like that decision, but that doesn't make it invalid. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that Mr. Montgomery was of sound mind and that Madison Parker is the rightful heir to his estate. We ask that you uphold his wishes and dismiss this frivolous lawsuit. Judge Harrison didn't even take a recess. I've heard enough, she said. This case is dismissed. The will stands as written. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees and court costs to the defendant. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, you should be ashamed of yourselves for bringing this case. She banged her gavel. It was over. I'd won. The media reaction was immediate. Within hours of the verdict, every news outlet was running the story. Judge rules against parents who threw out teen daughter. The videos from the trial went viral. My grandfather's words. Bennett's testimony about the emails. My parents' faces when the judge ruled against them. Public opinion shifted overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the manipulative gold digger. I was the brave young woman who'd overcome family betrayal and honored her grandfather's final wishes. My parents were destroyed in the court of public opinion. Articles appeared detailing how they'd tried to force me into an arranged marriage. How they'd thrown me out with nothing. How they'd banned me from seeing my dying grandfather and then tried to steal his fortune. Their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Their businesses started losing clients. People they'd called friends suddenly stopped taking their calls. But the real reckoning came from somewhere I didn't expect. 2 weeks after the verdict, Theodore called me. The IRS is investigating your parents, he said. Your grandfather filed a report before he died. Tax fraud, money laundering, some other financial crimes. They've been hiding income from Montgomery Innovations for years. Grandpa reported them? He had documentation of everything. He'd been collecting evidence for the last 5 years. He gave it all to the IRS 6 months before he died. My grandfather hadn't just protected me. He'd made sure my parents would face consequences for their behavior. Within a month, federal charges were filed. Gregory and Vanessa Parker were arrested on 12 counts of tax evasion and fraud. The total amount they'd hidden from the government was over $15 million. Their mansion was seized. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their company went into bankruptcy. Everything they'd built, or rather, everything they'd taken from others, crumbled. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction. I just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that my own parents had been so consumed by greed that they destroyed themselves. Bennett called me a week after his parents were arrested. "Can we talk?" he asked. "In person?" I met him at a coffee shop in a neutral part of town. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple shirt and jeans. He wasn't the arrogant, privileged man who'd sat in Theodore's office sneering at me. He looked broken. "I'm sorry," he said before I could even sit down. "I'm so sorry, Madison. For everything. For laughing when they threw you out. For ignoring you for 5 years. For testifying against you. For being a terrible brother." I sat down across from him. "Why are you apologizing now?" "Because I lost everything and I finally understand what you went through. I have nothing. No money. No job. No home. Mom and Dad are in jail and I'm living in a motel room working at a grocery store trying to survive. And I realized, this is what you did for 5 years. Except you did it without complaining. Without asking anyone for help. You just built a life for yourself. What do you want from me, Bennett?" "Nothing. I swear nothing. I don't want money or help or anything. I just wanted to apologize. To tell you that you were right. About everything. And that I'm ashamed of who I was." He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "What's this?" "A letter I should have sent you 5 years ago. I wrote it the night they threw you out. I was going to mail it to you but Mom found it and ripped it up. This is a new copy. I rewrote it from memory." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Madison, I'm sorry I didn't stop them. I'm sorry I laughed. I'm sorry I'm such a coward. You were right to refuse to marry Richard. You were right to stand up for yourself. I wish I was as brave as you. I hope you're okay wherever you are. I hope you build an amazing life. And I hope someday you can forgive me. Love, Bennett." My eyes burned with tears. "You wrote this 5 years ago?" "Yeah. And I've regretted not sending it every day since." He wiped his eyes. "I know it's too late. I know you probably hate me. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'm proud of you. And that you deserved every penny Grandpa left you." We sat in silence for a long moment. "What are you going to do now?" I asked finally. "Keep working. Keep living. Try to be a better person than I was. I'm in therapy now. Trying to figure out who I am without Mom and Dad controlling everything. It's hard, but it feels right." "Good," I said. "That's good. Madison? Do you think? I mean, I don't expect anything, but do you think maybe someday we could be siblings again? Not right now, I know I have to earn that. But maybe eventually?" I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the cruel stranger who'd sneered at me in Theodore's office, but the scared little boy who'd been raised by parents who taught him to value money over people. "Maybe," I said. "If you keep going to therapy. If you keep trying to be better. If you prove that you're serious about changing." "I will. I promise." I stood up to leave. "Madison?" Bennett called after me. "Thank you. For not completely shutting me out. I don't deserve it, but thank you." I nodded and walked out. I didn't know if Bennett and I would ever have a real relationship again. But at least he was trying. At least he'd apologized. That was more than my parents would ever do. My mother and father went to trial 6 months later. They were both convicted and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. I didn't go to their sentencing. I didn't send them letters. I didn't visit. I was done. They'd had years to be my parents, and they'd chosen money over me every single time. Now they could live with the consequences. The day after their sentencing, I stood in the office of Montgomery Innovations, my office now, and looked out at the city below. I'd spent the last 6 months learning everything about the company my grandfather built. The technology divisions. The real estate holdings. The investment portfolios. The charitable foundations. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But I wasn't doing it alone. I'd assembled a team of advisors who actually cared about the company's mission, not just its profits. I'd promoted people from within who'd been overlooked by previous management. I'd started initiatives to help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get into technology careers. I was building something that would make my grandfather proud. And I was doing it my way. 6 months after winning the trial, I stood on the stage of a renovated community center in the poorest neighborhood in the city, the same neighborhood where I'd lived when I had nothing. The building had been purchased with Montgomery Foundation money. Renovated with Montgomery Foundation money. Staffed with people hired through Montgomery Foundation jobs programs. And now it was opening its doors to provide free technology education, job training, and support services to anyone who needed it. I'd named it the Lawrence Montgomery Center for Opportunity. The room was packed with press, community members, politicians, and kids from the neighborhood who'd signed up for our first coding class. I stepped up to the microphone, nervous despite having practiced my speech 100 times. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I'm Madison Parker, and I'm honored to welcome you to the Lawrence Montgomery Center. This building represents something my grandfather believed deeply, that everyone deserves a chance. Not handouts, not charity, but opportunity." I looked out at the crowd and saw faces of all colors, all ages, all backgrounds. 5 years ago, I was thrown out of my family's home with one suitcase and $300. I worked 3 jobs while going to community college. I lived in an apartment with bars on the windows in a neighborhood where I heard gunshots at night. I know what it's like to be written off, to be told you're not good enough, to have people assume you'll fail. The room was silent. But I also know what it's like to have one person believe in you. My grandfather, Lawrence Montgomery, believed in me when nobody else did. He didn't give me money or connections or special treatment. He gave me something more valuable. He gave me his time, his attention, his belief that I could build something meaningful. I gestured to the building around us. This center is my way of passing that gift forward. We're offering free coding classes, business training, job placement services, mentorship programs, and scholarships. We're not just teaching skills. We're building a community of people who lift each other up, who believe in potential instead of privilege. I pulled out a photo of my grandfather and held it up. "Grandpa, I hope I'm making you proud. This is for you. And for everyone who's ever been told they don't deserve a chance." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, I walked through the center's classrooms, meeting the kids who'd enrolled in our first programs. Teenagers from foster care. Single mothers trying to learn new skills. Formerly incarcerated people looking for a fresh start. People like I'd been. People who just needed someone to believe in them. One girl, maybe 16, approached me shyly. "Miss Parker? I just wanted to say thank you. I'm in the foster system and nobody ever thought I'd amount to anything. But I love computers and now I get to learn coding for free. This program might change my life." I saw myself in her eyes. "What's your name?" I asked. "Destiny." "Destiny, you're going to do amazing things. I know it. And if you ever need help or advice or just someone to talk to, you can reach me directly." I handed her my card. "I mean that." She started crying and hugged me. I hugged her back, thinking about how much I'd needed a hug like this 5 years ago and how nobody had been there to give it to me. That evening, I had dinner with Tasha, my best friend who'd let me sleep on her couch when I had nowhere else to go. "Girl, I am so proud of you," she said, raising her glass. "From my couch to billionaire philanthropist. You're living proof that good things happen to good people." I got lucky. "Grandpa Lawrence left me." "Stop." She cut me off. "Yes, he left you money. But you earned it by being a good person. By working your tail off. By staying kind when the world was cruel. This isn't luck, Madison. This is karma finally working right." I clinked my glass against hers. "Thank you for everything you did for me. I wouldn't have survived without you. That's what real family does. And speaking of family," she grinned. "How's the cute teacher you've been volunteering with at the center?" I felt my face get hot. "Jordan? We're just friends. Friends who make googly eyes at each other constantly." Jordan Hayes taught at a public school in a low-income neighborhood. I'd met him 3 months ago when he brought a group of his students to tour the center. He was passionate about education, funny, kind, and completely uninterested in my money. We'd been volunteering together every Saturday teaching coding to kids. And yes, maybe I'd developed feelings for him. "He asked me out," I admitted. Tasha squealed. And I said yes. "We're going to dinner next week." "Finally. You deserve some happiness, girl. Some romance. Someone who loves you for you." That night, lying in my new apartment, not a mansion, just a nice, normal 2-bedroom place in a safe neighborhood, I thought about everything that had changed in 1 year. I'd gone from having nothing to having everything. But the real wealth wasn't the money. It was the freedom to help people. To build something meaningful. To honor my grandfather's memory by being the person he always believed I could be. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. "Looking forward to Saturday. Want to grab coffee before we teach?" I smiled and typed back, "Yes. I'd like that." Another text came through, this one from Bennett. "Finished my 3rd month of therapy. Got a promotion at work. Small steps. Thanks for believing in me." I responded, "Proud of you." Then one more text from an unknown number. This is Destiny from the center. I just wrote my first program. Thank you for giving me this chance. I saved her number and sent back. That's amazing. Keep it up. You're going to do great things. I fell asleep that night feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. 1 year later, I stood in the same office at Montgomery Innovations where I'd stood after my parents' conviction. But this time I wasn't alone. Jordan stood beside me, his hand in mine. We'd been dating for 10 months and he made me laugh every single day. He'd never asked me for anything. Never cared about the money. He just loved me messy, complicated, sometimes scared me. Ready for the board meeting? He asked. Ready as I'll ever be. I just proposed a new initiative to the board, expanding the Lawrence Montgomery Foundation to 10 more cities, building 10 more centers, helping thousands more kids. The board had approved it unanimously. My phone rang. It was Theodore. Madison, I have news. Remember that tech startup you invested in? The one developing accessible technology for disabled students. Yes. They just got acquired. Your $20 million investment is now worth $200 million. I sat down, stunned. What should we do with it? Theodore asked. I didn't even have to think. Put it into the foundation. Expand the scholarship program. Fund more centers. You're sure? That's a lot of personal money. I'm sure. Grandpa didn't leave me this money to hoard it. He left it to me to use it. So that's what I'm doing. After I hung up, Jordan kissed my forehead. Your grandfather would be so proud of you. I hope so. That evening, I visited my grandfather's grave for the first time since his funeral. I brought pancakes. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and opened the container. Hi, Grandpa, I said. I know this is weird, but we always had pancakes together, so I brought some. I set one pancake on the grass next to his headstone. A lot has happened since you left. Mom and Dad are in prison. Bennett's in therapy and actually trying to be a better person. I won the case, obviously. And I've been running your company and your foundation. I took a bite of my pancake. I opened the first Lawrence Montgomery Center. It's beautiful, Grandpa. Kids are learning and growing and getting chances they never would have had otherwise. I'm opening 9 more centers this year, helping thousands of kids. The wind rustled through the trees above me. I met someone. His name is Jordan. He's a teacher. He's kind and funny and he doesn't care about the money. He just loves me. I think you'd like him. I finished my pancake and stood up. I miss you every day. But I'm doing okay. Better than okay. I'm happy. I'm building something meaningful. I'm helping people. Just like you wanted. I pressed my hand to his headstone. Thank you for everything. For believing in me. For protecting me. For giving me the chance to do something good with your legacy. I won't let you down. I promise. As I walked back to my car, the sun was setting over the city. Everything was bathed in golden light, bright and clear and beautiful. I thought about the girl I'd been 5 years ago, standing outside my family's mansion with one suitcase, terrified and alone. I thought about the woman I was now, standing on top of the world with the power to change lives. And I thought about my grandfather, who'd seen something in me that nobody else had. Who'd loved me unconditionally. Who'd given me not just money but something far more valuable, the belief that I was worthy. I'd taken that belief and built a legacy. Not a legacy of wealth. A legacy of love. And that, I knew, was worth more than $6 billion could ever be.